No. There we go. We've started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to July. We've got another of our joint meetings with the Portsmouth Committee on Arts and Nonprofits. Thanks very much, folks. We're going to go through a few things today that I think should be pretty interesting. Kate's going to lead us through the ordinance, which will be awesome. We'll take some questions on ACG, if you had any, and what we think might be best next. And then we'll hear our normal work group updates. I was giving Jeffrey a few seconds, but he's not here. But the minutes did go out for June 12th a little bit ago. Any motion, please, to approve them? Somebody other than me.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Awesome. Thanks, folks. So what are on our minds regarding our July 6th ACG kickoff? What are the thoughts? Anything?
I'm thrilled that ACG is doing this. I've worked with them before. They are a really fantastic company. And I was really impressed by that first session. I thought it was really well run. And it made me very optimistic that we're going to be able to work with them in a positive way to try and meet the internally set deadlines. And my last experience working with them was very positive. So I feel really good about it. You know, it's kind of a strange process, not knowing until after they're hired who's being hired, you know, the way the city works.
Yeah.
You know, so it felt a little nerve-wracking in that respect. But for those of you who are not familiar with the company and their work, I know Bruce Thibodeau, who's on our team, who's the CEO of the company. And I've had great experience with him and think they're very talented. And he put together a really amazing team that just seems to be growing. It's much larger than the last time we worked with them. So, yeah, so I'm thrilled about it. I don't know if anyone had any opposing views of how that first meeting went, but I thought it was really nice. So, John, you how did you feel about it?
Oh, hi, Russ. Well, I thought it was good too. I mean, I think I hadn't seen any background about ACG.
Yep.
So I appreciated getting the proposal. That was really helpful. And it was, I think, you know, they seem like a really capable and experienced group. So that's good. I wanted to respond to one of the concerns that we talked about, which has to do with making sure that people trust the process. And I think that ought to be a goal that somehow we embrace, so that if there are people who feel for whatever reason that they haven't been included in the process, that we make sure we open doors and let them know that we need help, that there's a way for people to get involved, so that at the end of the process, to the extent that it's possible, that we have a document that people embrace and they believe in, which is so not normal.
Yeah.
I think we have to really commit ourselves to think in a very different way, so that when we have this thing before us, that there isn't somebody who says, I don't believe in it, I don't feel like I was involved. So I'd like to make, I'll work to make that happen. And I hope we can figure out how our work groups and ACG can make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I'm going to add, because it was mentioned by Russ and in a way mentioned by John. They're familiar with Portsmouth because they have hired 2 executive directors for our various locations. So they're very familiar with it in that regard. And those people, of course, had nothing but praise for them, but they even gave their own caveat. Even though I was hired, I still thought they did a good job. The other thing, too, that was interesting that I'd like to relay, because we felt a little bit uncomfortable at our interview because we couldn't deal directly with you and tell you exactly what was going on. That was hard for me personally. That's why we wrote that descriptive paragraph as best we could, so that we could fulfill you with confidence. But the other thing that I thought was present very noticeably in the interview that was a little bit toned down in the kickoff was they are totally about inclusion. They went through about 10 minutes of how their company deals with inclusion, and I think they have it on their team, is obvious. So that is a big thing to them personally. I think it's a big tenet of their organization. So hopefully we'll be able to see that in effect here, but I think your comments are perfect.
So one question I had about that, and it had to do with, community engagement. What should be the standard that we want to meet in terms of community engagement? How much should there be, or what's the structure for community engagement, so we will feel that it is indeed an inclusive process? Because I guess I would think it can't simply be a survey that's put on the website and we wait for responses. That's an area I don't have experience. So I know.
I think that's probably, it's a great point, and I think we can get that question to them. And what I expect, because they're a talented organization, they would have measures of effectiveness and they would have measures of performance, and they do have goals. I would think it's a percentage based on the overall population, as well as to include the different demographics and how to reach those people. They've done the exact same thing at much larger cities. So I think that's a great question. We can ask them and say, hey, what's your breakdown for measures of effectiveness here?
Or something that we can, as a committee, feel is, where you have confidence about.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what you might be talking about are channels of engagement. So like,
is really different now than it was even 5 years ago.
Totally.
Right.
But, a survey is just one example of a channel of engagement.
Yes.
My guess is that there are going to be in-person listening sessions
Right.
as well, and probably several other types of engagement with stakeholders in the community. And, a diversity of channels is going to help you reach your inclusion goals. But it's got to be more than that too. That's going to have to get there. So it's a good point. And I think Alan's comments about their commitment to inclusion is going to only help us in that direction. I mean, I was really struck by Jeffrey's comments in the session about making sure that the working visual artists were included in the process, because I think there is a danger, especially with the original arts and nonprofits group, of being too nonprofit organizational focused. And I think we want to make sure that we're conscious of trying to avoid that, and
Yes.
that while they're one group of stakeholders, we need to make sure that the actual working artists in the community, the actors, the musicians, the painters, all the different people, the writers in the community that are individual independent artists, feel like they're core to what we're doing, as well as, the remainder of the community. And it doesn't feel like a plan that's developed by nonprofit organizations. Yeah.
Right.
Super. Which also came out from the, I was reading the Art Speak feedback, and there was that one section that was not nonprofit, not,
Yeah.
So
Just, I want to remind everyone that I think we talked about this after the ACG became public, but during the interview, and Alan was there, they are really excited to work with us. It wasn't like we had to, coerce them or beg them. They were excited to be here. And the other thing to build on that from the kickoff meeting is the comments that I've received from forwarding more information even after Thursday's meeting is they're well impressed by the amount of work that has been done, and the amount of documentation and the amount of information. So I think they feel good about, they're not starting from scratch. And I know that was important. Certainly Jeffrey voiced it, that the work that's been done is being acknowledged and is going to be built upon. And it's certainly going to be critical. And the last piece is what I kept hearing from ACG is, it is our plan. It is not their plan. It is not cookie cutter. It is not how they've always done things. Hopefully they'll bring those benchmarks and the metrics that you all decide you want to use. But at the end of the day, the ownership is here. And that's, I guess, a best practice, right? It's not this outside thing, which I think will help with even those who don't engage and say, I wasn't engaged, that they know that it came from their community and not from an outside firm, hopefully.
Okay, so I have a
Can I just, can I just add something? Because, you know, the thing with the nonprofits is that I think the nonprofit organizations have to be seen as the way to get to all the individual artists. I mean, because majority of our employees are subcontractors, they're individual artists. I know the same is true for PMAC and with the visual arts. So that should be clear that we're the conduits and to make an effort to get some of those individual artists involved. We have meetings, you know, I mean, we have 25 people that are in our company that none of them are employees. They're all separate artists. So I just wanted to put that out there because that could be a role that, you know, we all can help with.
John, we've got 3 minutes on this subject.
Oh, I had one more
Sure.
point to follow up with Sean, sorry. So I think it's great for the Cultural Planning Committee to own the plan, but I felt a little bit of uncertainty in terms of how the process actually is implemented. So we've hired ACG to lead the process of writing the plan that we own, but it felt like it was confusing who actually is going to like run the listening sessions, who's managing that.
I can answer that. Their answer at the interview was they will be doing the larger share of the organization. They've got 2 in-person sessions coming, but they want us to be the face. They made it very clear they're not going to be here. ACG is having a listening session. It'll be some aspect of Portsmouth with Portsmouth in the name, whether it's the cultural planning subcommittee or something else. They were very clear about that. And then as far as their process is concerned, I think you could probably see it in the proposal that Sean sent. They do have timelines. And actually, I was a little surprised they didn't bring those up on the kickoff meeting. It might be because they're wanting to adjust them for what they now have learned about us. But they were quite specific in a matrix where they had dates and what they're going to do.
Well, I'll leave it at what I said, because there's a difference between who's the face and who's managing the work.
I just was going to add, I just went through this. The Sustainability Committee is doing the Climate Action Plan. We just had our first public input session. And so the city does the convening of those meetings and invites everyone. The committee is kind of the public face who invites people, but the committee doesn't actually run the session. The consultant does.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way it's done. So it looks like it's a city-run event. So then people will come knowing that the city's doing it, but the consultant's the expert.
And ACG is already thinking of who they're bringing. I think they're going to bring 3 to each of the 2 in-person sessions the last time they mentioned something. So, and one of them I think will be the president because he's from
Boston. See, Boston or Hartford?
Is that where he is? Because he's from Maine. He's from Southern Maine.
Oh, he's living in Maine now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that takes us to 12:15. Perfect. Don't hesitate if you've got more questions, get them over to us and we'll make sure we're asking these questions of ACG as well, because I think those are some good points and I'll make sure they get over to them. Proposed City Arts Agency Ordinance. You've got the whole write-up, which I think has been a little refined from our last meeting with some points and some questions, and I'll turn it over to Kate. Kate Cook.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk first quickly about timeline, so that everyone understands the process of getting an ordinance through and committee appointments and how that will work from the council side of things. So I'm working on a timeline backwards from December. So we have a few meetings in December, 1 meeting in November. And so the council will take, if you go backwards in the process, take 2 sessions to appoint members to a committee. So you need 2 full council sessions. You need a month prior to that to receive applications and for the mayor to put people on the agenda to appoint. Okay, so that's then you're back already to basically October. So then you need 3 readings of any ordinance. And the way the council's been handling this is that we not only have 3 readings of an ordinance, but you also have an introductory session. So it's really 4 council meetings to introduce an ordinance and to approve it. So then if we backdate there, we're in August. So really, if you want to get this approved, it probably needs to be at the council by the 2nd session in August. 2nd council meeting in August is what I would say. But the way the council has been doing things lately is sending them through my other committee, the governance committee, when it's approving ordinance changes, because that's what governance does. So it usually goes to governance first and then would go from governance to the council. So we're dealing with 2 other ordinance changes right now for sustainability, which is also a blue ribbon committee.
Technology was not got it.
Converting to a permanent committee, and then also economic development is changing their ordinance currently. So we're dealing with 2 of those now. And what they've done is they actually went through the council first, came to governance sent them back to the committees with questions, and then they came back. So I'm trying to give you kind of like a general timeline of where we are. So that's why you're seeing this now, and with a request to for kind of final input to send it to arts and nonprofits for approval. So with that, I joined the Zoom so that I could share my screen. I was hoping, Sean, is there any way you can allow me to share the screen?
I believe so.
Okay. I want to share the markup of the changes so that everybody can see kind of what all the changes were that we made. So I'm going to share that now. It should come up.
Kate, is this, so in our packet, are we getting the revised version?
Yes.
So, okay, and this shows the original with the changes.
This is from the last meeting, between the last meeting and now.
Yes.
These are the changes that I have made. And so you have the final version, a clean copy.
Yes.
In your agenda right now. So, but I wanted people to see where the changes were made so that you can understand what was done here.
And I have one more question
Yes.
before you get started. Does that mean we can't make any changes today?
No, absolutely not. Today, I would love to have you provide suggestions today for final changes from this meeting, so that then hopefully we can move forward. But if it's too much, then we'll have to delay a little bit. And that's okay. But I was hoping we could get kind of final input here. So you'll see first in the first paragraph A, which basically defines the membership of the committee. We've changed from organizations to institutions that seem to make more sense to individuals, and didn't, people were concerned about preferential treatment for nonprofits over for-profit institutions by calling them institutions. We're trying to eliminate that sense of preference there. And we added a phrase, both for-profit and nonprofit in nature, so that everybody knows it can be both. We're thinking about galleries in particular. We have a lot of galleries in town that are technically for-profit. And then we changed the membership to 17 members, 5 members representing those institutions, and then 5 members, as you will see later. And it just describes how those would be represented. They'll represent the institutions, not individuals. That membership shall rotate among arts and cultural institutions in the community, so we don't have constantly the same representation. And then 5 individuals who are part of the arts community of artists within the city of Portsmouth, and 5 members shall be individuals with appreciation for community arts and cultural programming. So that makes it a very balanced 5-5-5. And then 1 city councilor serving a term corresponding with their respective tenure in office. And then there's a representative of the city manager's office, which currently is Sean sitting here. So that is, that's basically how the committee was defined in membership. I want to stop though here, because this was just like very arbitrary from the input that I received. We want to make sure we have artists. Okay. We want to make sure we have community members. Okay. We want to make sure we have institutions. Okay. But we don't want them to dominate. So we don't want them to be more than 50%. So what I have here is a third, and a third. But I'm happy to adjust that based upon what this group thinks. So
Can you
just clarify, Kate, I'm sorry. I don't, you know, we're two different contexts and this is like neither reading nor distance.
No, it gets very
Darn
confusing.
thing. You're talking about, so it's 5 from institutions, 5 artists and 5 community members.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And being an artist that happens to be involved with an institution wouldn't exclude you, right? So we have several examples of individuals that are artists. I use Amanda Kidd-Kessler as a great example, an artist, but also New Hampshire Art Association. So she wouldn't be excluded from serving as an artist. So, but you would kind of choose, where do you fall?
Does inclusion of institutional representation dodge any residency requirement because you're representing an institution that is addressed in Portsmouth, as opposed to if you're an individual artist, you must be a resident of Portsmouth? Is that the way it works?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So that's the challenge we have, is that overall in our ordinance, it says that you have to be a member of this community. It's a Portsmouth resident just to serve on committees. However, if you represent an institution rather than you're representing as an individual, then that institution is located in the city of Portsmouth, that is fine. So we have examples of that already, where we have institutions that are represented, like the Chamber of Commerce, for example, has a seat at the EDC. So.
When you have the general category of community members, that's like, is there some criterion as to why this person would be picked? I mean, I'm thinking largely as patrons of the arts, but maybe that's not right.
There isn't criteria provided here for how that person would be picked. The mayor would be choosing people based upon who the mayor thinks is qualified to serve on the committee, which is currently the case for all of our committees. People apply and sometimes they're qualified and sometimes they're not. And the mayor makes that determination. It's the mayor's role to appoint people. So the mayor will sit down and make a determination whether or not an individual is qualified to serve. And if the mayor thinks that they're qualified, wants them to serve on the committee, then the mayor will appoint them. So you would anticipate that the mayor would appoint people who care about the arts to an arts and cultural committee. But I have to be clear that mayors have a lot of leeway in the way they appoint to any committee. So that's always important to remember.
There's no stipulation that the community member at large not be affiliated with an institution or be an artist themselves. So for example, I could fall under any one of those 3 categories. Right. Because I'm a resident, so I could be at large. I'm an artist, so I could be an artist, and I'm an institution, so associated with an institution, so I could be there. Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to add that the work group too talked about this for a long time, just trying to, and we kind of concluded that we really had to trust the process, and that the current mayor and future mayors would really try to honor the gist of the ordinance and what we were trying to achieve, which was a balance between all the different peoples that need to be represented. So we talked a lot about it, and we felt this was probably the best. And maybe in the future it could get skewed, and then we'll have to look at it again, just like, an ordinance can change in the future. So we felt really comfortable with this number and this kind of setup. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether other commissions are as large as 17 members. That seems like a very large number. And I wondered whether you'd thought about, instead of having 5, 5, and 5, it could be even 4, 4, and 4, only because it seems like a lot of people to wrangle, and people are nodding. So I'm not sure who made the choice for those numbers.
I did initially, and the only reason that we started at 15 was because I took the current makeup of the Arts and Nonprofits Committee and said, we need X number of members. There really isn't another commission that is this size. Sustainability will be this size when it's created, but they're planning a drawdown process. So they currently have 18. They're hoping to all be reappointed. And then as people leave, not appoint new members until they hit 10 to 12 members, and then they're requesting reappointment. So they're trying to keep their numbers down around 12. And I think that that's probably pretty standard. 12 is usually a good number. 12 to 14 is what we usually see. So
should we be looking at revising the number rather than starting out with a large number and trying to eliminate people along the way?
I feel like ArtSpeak was originally around 12 too, 12 or 13.
Yep.
So that it makes sense to me too, just from the simple numbers game of if you have 5 institutions versus 4 institutions, the amount of time it takes to cycle through all the institutions in Portsmouth before you're going back to the same institutions. And some are going to opt out of participating. So it makes it a little more manageable, I think, in recruitment.
We've got Barbara Master on the line.
Yeah, thanks. Russ is going where I was about to go. When we started to work on this, you know, we looked at the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofit Group, and if we just took that as is, we would have said, let's have 10 organizations and 2 people at large. Obviously, that couldn't work. So we had to figure out what kind of breakdown do we create so that we try to get as many people involved as possible, thus getting to 5, 5, and 5, meaning some of the institutions will not be represented right away, but the idea of not having the same ones over and over again will help us cycle through. And then just one other point that we're talking about approval process. Remember this too, and I think I'm right, Councillor Cook, that when the mayor reads off who is applying to be on a committee, that happens at one meeting, and the community or the council can go to the mayor and say, I'm not okay with that. So there's also a process for feedback from the community. So it's not just, I want to do this and I'm going to do it. There is a mechanism there for feedback as well. I think that's important to point out.
Tom, could I ask, do you have any input from your work group on this point? Or you have too much, or?
You heard it already. No, I mean, I think 4 or 5, for me, I think the important thing is that whatever is decided, we decide on it today, and then we push it forward today. That we don't ask Kate or anyone else to go back and say, oh, can you, change it? Whatever changes we make today, we want to all agree on and just push it forward is what I would.
Thanks.
So I don't see anything wrong with 4. I mean, when I first started 2, I thought it was a lot of members too. But then you're going to think too, how many people aren't going to make it, but is there still a quorum? And,
So you're saying that the 17 is a good number. That would be, so that's what's in here as the total number of members, 17.
And I'm happy to go down. I mean, essentially, if you take away 1 each, you're down to 14. I'm happy to do that as well. I mean, it just.
That's fine too, if that's what most people are.
I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah,
I think that
would
works.
too.
Yeah.
I just think it's a little, 17 seems quite large to me
Onerous.
compared to other committees and commissions. You can always add people. It's harder to take it away. If you find, find out it needs more representation of whatever sort, then you can add people. But
Okay. So that would be 4, 4, and 4, and then a city representative, and who's the?
And the city councilor representative.
okay.
So one from the city and one from city
Staff,
council.
staff and council.
Yeah.
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 Who
Quick
are
question,
ex
Kate.
officio.
Yeah.
Kate,
Ex officio members.
Neighborhood groups, has that
Yeah.
been something that's really started to coalesce in Portsmouth? I know that there are certain neighborhood organizations. How widespread is that throughout Portsmouth? Like, how much of Portsmouth do neighborhood groups cover?
Not all of it.
Yeah.
Quite a bit though. You'd be surprised. The citywide neighborhood committee probably has the best take on how much is covered, and they approach it by wards. And the reason they do that is because not all the neighborhoods are completely covered in each ward. But we have something like 26 neighborhood associations in the city. So it's quite a bit.
That's, yeah, my thinking was just, how do we, again, kind of, always trying to get away from just us people who are really involved in the arts. How do we get to a greater Portsmouth? Whether there would be a representative, chosen from amongst that group to represent the, various neighborhood interests. I know it's hard for one neighborhood to represent another, but just following that line of thinking, how do we cast a net to those types of people?
And that is something that this committee should probably discuss as you get closer to approval of an ordinance and you have a committee coming into play. How do we recruit people that are underserved to make sure we have some representation from underserved communities in Portsmouth? And so that should be something kind of down the line this committee is thinking, how do we get them to apply? Because I think the biggest challenge is people just don't apply. And so how do we reduce barriers to application? Yeah. And some of it is people don't have time to serve, unfortunately.
Sean, I don't think we need parliamentary procedures for the shift to 4, do we? But do we want to take a quick vote so everybody can get their name out there?
I'm gonna ask Councilor Cook about.
Councilor Cook,
I'm
do we
happy.
need a parliamentary procedure for this, or can we just say 4 or 5 all in favor?
We need a final vote before it moves out of committee. So I can just say we've changed it to 4, or you.
I'd like to
can-
make sure everybody gets a chance to weigh their opinion.
Okay,
So
it's fine.
all in favor of 4?
Aye.
Awesome. 4 it is. Thanks.
So I will definitely make that change. Is everyone happy with the other language around membership and term? Were there any other questions there?
Are there term limits?
They're not, but except for institutional members. And it's not that they have limits. It's just we're asking them not to serve consecutively.
Okay, cool.
So, but everyone else doesn't have necessarily a term limit
Okay.
in this definition. You might find later that you want to change that. Sometimes that happens. That's what's happening with the EDC. It's not around terms and membership, but they're coming back to the council after many years of operation and saying, you know what we're doing is a little bit different than what we used to do. Can we change that and be more clear in our ordinance? And so that happens. And this year, the cemetery committee came back in less than a year from adoption of their originating ordinance and asked for changes to their membership, which we did. So it's always possible.
Question?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I was going to ask that about term limits. I don't know why they would not be in the document. I would think that there should be term limits. That's number one. And the other is there, because I just can't read the whole document here, are there place for alternates and their role so that alternates would attend the meetings as a non-voting member, but if somebody drops out, that's where you'd go to pull that person over into the committee?
Currently, there's no alternates in this definition, but we can add them if the committee thinks we need an alternate or 2. Happy to do so. What generally just happens is that you have to have quorum to conduct business. You can still have meetings. I think Arts and Nonprofits has dealt with this. If you don't have quorum, how you deal with that. But usually, unless you're making quasi-judicial decisions, we don't have very many alternates. I think the exception is the EDC has alternates
Yes.
to act. And so that's kind of unusual on our boards and commissions. But if we want alternates, we can add them.
I just think the only challenge I like the idea. I just brought it up for discussion, but I think the challenge would be what role do the alternates play? In other words, if one is a community at large and one is an artist, and that's not who drops out or whatever. But obviously, if an institution finds they're not able to attend, another institution could come in, I suppose. I'm rambling. I don't mean to. I think,
Robin, those are good ideas. I was just about to say out loud, and you're right. You've just hit on another point. You need 4 alternates. Or 3 alternates I had 4 in my head because I'm looking over here, but yeah, 3 alternates. So you would have one for each group.
well, but with the institutions, if somebody on their staff is the representative and that person moves away, that institution would just appoint another person from that institution, I would assume, and the mayor would have to accept that person.
Right. And yes, that would be the case because it would be institutional representation. So the institution wouldn't even necessarily have to send the same person to every meeting. So that's important to note.
Is there any other situation like that where an institution can send different people throughout the year?
Yes, the Chamber of Commerce can send different people to the
Okay.
EDC. So if they want, it's not important appointed by individuals, my understanding. It's probably the same person comes. But, you know, it's people, different people could come. We have the same situation with sustainability and the Eco Club representation. Eco Club assigns members to serve on sustainability. They're going to maintain that in their ordinance. So then sometimes we get different students for different meetings. So
is this also a situation where we could try it out one way? And if we find that we need to add people, we could certainly come back to the council and say, we thought we needed that this would work, but it turns out we need something different.
Absolutely. That's something a committee can always do. And the council are really responsive to the needs of a committee.
Can I just want to ask Kate a quick overview of what you got here so we can manage things, because I have heard it completely clearly. We want to cover this and give you a finished product so that we can go. So if you could just give us an overview of what we got coming here to talk about, we can hit some of these.
Not much. There's not a lot else. I mean, I think the big issue is definition of membership. I think that's probably the biggest issue for this committee as far as decision making. We didn't have a lot of recommended changes elsewhere. The changes that I made were changing the word institution. And if you get down to section C, I just added a phrase up at the top to make it clear that the overall duty of the commission was support for arts and culture within the wider Portsmouth community, including but not limited to the following actions. And then we added foster implementation of the cultural plan of the city of Portsmouth and shall conduct other studies and planning processes as necessary, focusing on the arts and cultural community, making sure that it's clear that this is the committee that's responsible for the cultural plan, for the AFTA study, for any other research studies that the committee wants to do around arts and culture within the city, that this is kind of the committee that does that. We decided to specify that, I think, out of our last meeting rather than just assuming it. And then not a lot of the other language changed. I was asked to add a phrase around promoting the welfare of existing arts and cultural institutions, because I don't think that was really clear. Before it just said supporting the welfare of arts institutions, but making sure that people understand it's not just for new institutions, it's for existing institutions, and support coordination between and communication between artists and arts and cultural institutions. So that was more a clarification point, I think. And then the rest is just updating for language, appropriate language, shall work to increase and sustain. I just left out a verb there, I believe, for the last time.
So I had a few things that were more grammatical sort of things, like number 2, the sentence says at the end, and support coordination and communication. I think it's among local artists.
We can do that.
Arts and culture.
So between
is, and then the other one is on 3 in the word, it says to attract and retain artists and arts and cultural institutions to Portsmouth, I think. Right? Because aren't we talking about within the city and also creating a plan for attracting and retaining folks to the city? And then in number 5, sorry about this, folks.
No.
The commission shall identify funding sources. I don't think we want to say municipal, do we?
We do. And
Okay.
The only reason I added that is that there's a question about funding for the arts that's always lingering out there about city funding for the arts. And so is there a city budget line item for the arts? Is there a % for parking?
Right. But then it says
municipal funding.
Then I think it's confusing because it says identify funding sources, including state and federal funding sources. designated for municipalities to
Yes.
support its work.
Yes.
So,
So those are different things.
okay.
So municipal funding sources and municipal funding sources, internal and external. So internal municipal funding sources would be like our own funding, a line item. External would be funding that comes specifically in the form of grants for municipalities.
Okay, so I
So-
would just figure out a way to clarify that. I don't know if anybody else found it confusing. If it was just me, then don't bother.
Okay.
I think it was in response to not being in competition with other nonprofit organizations seeking funding. So it was to clarify that it would just be municipal funding.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that goes back
So-
in my head to exactly what your work group 2 report said, was there was that whole
Yes.
line about, hey, we need money, we need funding, we need to,
Yeah,
it was a
yeah.
common theme throughout your responses.
Right. The goal is
And-
to prevent fundraising.
Including could simply be as well as.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Okay.
thank you. I just.
I mean, because I knew what it meant because I knew what it meant, but somebody reading it for the first time, you know,
Okay.
that's where Ellen's point comes in.
I can work with the attorneys on this one and make sure that that's really clear. And
Thank
I
you.
should note that when it comes to the governance committee, the attorneys will wordsmith it again. So to make sure it's clear.
Yeah. That's
Although
fine.
they've been through, legal department has been through this 3 times already. Just so everyone is aware, whenever I'm making changes, I always shop it back through to make sure that we haven't done anything that legally won't work.
Kate, could I add a couple things I think that might wrap this up? Was that
Yes.
pretty much it?
Yeah.
What I have got left over, we've got Ellen's question that came about making changes later, and I think that was an affirmative. But then Robin speaking about, do we want to address alternates, or do we want to address term limits? So I don't want to leave here with those hanging open.
Yes.
Any comments before we? Kate?
So I'm happy to do either, both. I'm very flexible on this. We don't have very many institutions with term limits, but we do, I believe, have one. With Public Art Review, we wrote in a term limit, I think 2 terms. I think that's right.
We have,
Yeah.
we have in there,
You
Kate,
have
the
to,
3
yeah.
years. We have for a term of 3 years. All members shall be appointed by the
Yes.
mayor, subject to approval for a term of 3 years. So-
Exactly. They're serving for 3 years, but they can be
I-
reappointed. Everyone except the institutional members, which we clarify that they
Yeah.
can't serve consecutive terms. But we can, if the committee wants, say no one can serve consecutive terms, or that regular members can only serve 2 terms, or, it depends on, what this committee really wants there. So, and the same thing with alternates. Happy to do that as well.
To me, the way I read this, that I think your group, Tom, was involved with, and Kate, was that we're giving this Art and Cultural Commission some flexibility to meet whatever they encounter come January 24, January 25, January 26. And with Ellen's question that's saying, can they change? And the answer is yes. To me, that I thought was the intent, to give room here to wiggle. But I guess the other point would be no, here's the plan and take it this way. So other points, I think Tom had one, Jason was no.
I would say that on several of our city committees, we have people who've served very long terms because they asked to be reappointed for new terms. The rec board's a great example of this, where we have people who've served 20 to 30 years on the rec board. And they've done that because they're interested in recreation and they want to stay involved. And so they continually ask to be reappointed. In some ways, that brings more expertise to that committee around what's happened in the past and what happens in the future. I should note, though, that when people reapply, the mayor is never obligated to reappoint you. So we do have mayors that don't reappoint people, and then we end up with change. And so it's really, this is, up to this committee. Do you absolutely not want people to serve more than 1 term or 2 terms? Or are you okay with that? And I guess that's a real question.
For me, it's let's see how the committee operates, and we can make changes as needed. We can't, think we're going to have the perfect committee right out of it. Would be great. But I'm not expecting that the committee will be perfect, right? Coming right at it.
And Ellen, that's exactly what our work group too came to the conclusion is that we could spend a lot of time just coming up with what ifs, what if, and not give it a chance to just start and kind of do its work and see how it goes. My opinion is skip the alternatives just because then we're back up to 17 people, the 555, which we thought was too many, and skip the term limits. I know my experience on working with some other like the HCC, I appreciated some people that were there long term just because of their historical knowledge and their expertise, and then they reapplied and didn't get it. But, so that's always that avenue to not get reappointed to set the term limits. So
Can I, let me just let Barbara's got her hand raised.
Thanks. The only thing around term limits or membership that we haven't discussed in this group that we did in group 2, because I was part of that group with Tom and Kate, was do we stagger term limits so you don't lose everybody potentially every 3 years? So I don't mean to throw a wrench in this, but that was something we did talk about, but didn't make it here. So I don't know if that is worth talking about, or we let that go and we just deal with it as is.
I think that this is a very important point, actually. Usually we provide some instructions when a committee is first set up for how to do that. And I can ask if we want to put it in the actual ordinance or if we want to put it as separate instructions with the ordinance. Usually with adoption, sometimes they're just separate instructions for how to appoint individuals. My suggestion would be that the 5 institutional members be appointed to a full 3-year term. And then that, so that you choose a few from each one that gets appointed to a certain term. And then, you have 5 on a 3-year term, 5 on a 2-year term, 5 on a 1-year term. So you set up a healthy rotation at the very, very beginning. So that can be just done randomly. That can be done so that there are just a few institutions that have a 3-year, a few institutions that have a 2-year, one institution that has a 1-year, and the same vice versa, so that it's really spread out. But that's usually how it will work. And sometimes you can just give instructions. You don't get to choose who those people are. The mayor gets to make those decisions. So sometimes you can just give instructions to the mayor, appoint 5 members for a 3-year term, 5 for a 2-year term, 5 for a 1-year term to start, so that there's a healthy rotation. And then it'll automatically we'll get reappointments as needed. Or
just to be clear, you appoint somebody to a 1-year term, and after 1 year, they get replaced with somebody with a 3-year term.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That way you have this healthy rotation. It's something that we've been working on at the council level for 1.5 years, trying to bring a lot of our committees back into a healthy rotation, because we have several that everyone rotates at the same time. And it makes it difficult because you lose a lot of expertise. So
Basically, I think what I've heard too is that you're kickstarting the initial group. You're saying you can stagger, but the first is just to kickstart, and then after that they can stagger how they might see fit. Is that?
Yeah, we'll have 5 that rotate every year that get reappointed or get appointed every year, but it'll be kind of, I don't know if it will matter what the mix is or not, but it'll be 5 that get appointed each year. And then that'll be ongoing, and everyone will have 3-year terms after the first 2 years.
And that's what the Kickstart does. It builds that stagger.
It builds a stagger.
Okay. And which is pretty much what Jeffrey was saying, but now I think I've captured it. Do you have?
Sorry, I have another question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, may I ask another question?
Robin, yeah.
Robin.
So Kate and committee, we've got 2 other arts kind of related activities going through the city. Excuse me. One is you mentioned the Public Art Committee, and the other process is the Percent for Art. And we're going to be called a commission, an Arts and Cultural Commission. And I don't know if this is part of the ordinance or how you feel about this, but would those 2 other activities fall under the commission? Would the commission have any overriding rulings or comments or whatever about percent for art and public art?
I'm happy to clarify that. The Public Art Review Committee is the committee responsible for percent for art. So that is really their main responsibility at the city. Is any capital projects that come before the city, they have a percentage designated for art, and Public Art Review is responsible for commissioning, essentially issuing RFP for art projects, and then reviewing those art projects and selecting an art project for that capital project. So these are all on public property, city property. So that's why we have a Public Art Review Committee. That's ultimately their responsibility. The Arts and Cultural Commission is just tasked with working to support the Public Art Review Committee and kind of working in conjunction to support their public art initiatives and their public art efforts. And that is, I believe, outlined here in the, I'm looking here to tell you exactly where. Yes, number 6, there it is, sorry. The Arts and Cultural Commission shall work in coordination with and in support of the Public Art Review Committee to promote public art in the city of Portsmouth. So
thank you. I was just looking for where that might be. So thanks. Yes, you just had to scroll down and it was there.
Yeah, and on mine went to the next page. But yeah, it's really just to support the work of the committee, support having public art within the community. But this commission wouldn't be responsible for doing any of the review process around that, which is really what the Public Art Review Committee is tasked with.
Great. Thanks.
So Kate, I just wrote down what I've heard, and that is the folks here have heard the changes you made since last month. We're good with them. We added some grammar and some typos and some discussion points that were represented by terminology. We changed it from 5 to 4, the number of members in each of the categories. And then we didn't actually say this yet, but what I thought, what I can summarize from the last one is your staggering Kickstart would fall into instructions that are also added. Is that true?
That's where I would probably suggest to put them. Legal might come back and say we need to put a line in the ordinance. They can do that later after it's here. If they need to, and those are usually very basic, they will be appointed in accordance with creating a stagger. It's like very, very simple language. So I don't think that's something that needs to come back here if legal says we need it in the ordinance.
Okay, thanks. And I think we just got another question from our Zoom. Sean's got it. He'll read it here in a second.
Okay. Here's a note from Karen. Can't seem to raise my hand. Would suggest we look at shorter terms, as I believe a 3-year term might be too long, especially for some individuals who may not have the time away from work and other daily duties. I believe shorter terms may allow for more diversity too.
But aren't you already addressing that with the 1 year and the?
Not really.
So
once the 1 year happens, it'll be 3 years going forward. Yeah. So there's 2 things that having a 2-year term would do. One, it would allow you to, in the first round, have half people have 1 year and the other half of the people have a 2 year. So it simplifies that stagger process. And then all the people who have 1 year could potentially re-enlist for a second year. It could allow you to change the institutional thing to a minimum or maximum of 2 consecutive. So they'd be there for 4 years instead of only 3 years, and have the option to stay for 2 or stay for 4. And it does do what Karen suggests, which is make it a more realistic lift for some people in the community who might not be willing to apply for 3 years. My board started with 2-year terms, and after close to a decade, we switched to 3-year terms, but the board decided that on their own. And it was a good startup practice for us. It seemed to make it an easier ask in the first decade for people to join the board when it was only a 2-year ask as opposed to a 4-year ask. My only question is does it feel like a citywide standard that all the boards are on a 3-year cycle? Because I also consider the council and the mayor in this process as to how frequently they have to appoint people and stuff like that.
At the city, a lot, it's 3 to 5 years is generally. So we have some 3, some, I think we have one that's 4, and then some that are 5-year terms.
So 2 would be unusually short.
2 is pretty short. The only members that usually serve 2-year terms are your city councilors.
So can I
My comments, if you don't mind on those, I like the idea of continuity. The points are all absolutely understandable, great points, and I think 2 is a very viable option. For me, when you suggested 3, I would assume you had talked about it a little bit. My assumptions were that was a continuity thing, and then also the basis of this board seems to be people who are going to be vested in it, if not already working in it. So while I happen to be in a privacy company, which probably doesn't have a lot to do with art, although we have nice art on the walls, you can all come by and see it. All has to do with privacy. You know, I do have other tasks, and I think that's what Karen is referring to, and I appreciate that. But just so on the one hand, you've got everything Russ said, and I think on the other side of the spectrum is there's a continuity there, and then hopefully the folks that have volunteered are vested because it's what they do for a professional career. Sure.
Can I just say one thing? For me, 3-year terms are more reasonable because it takes an entire year to really understand what's going on.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
what the city processes are and what you're dealing with. So you really don't have members who, I mean, in 1 year, there's not a lot that people can do unless they come in already having been involved in some way. So that's why I thought the 3-year term was good, although the other points are well made, but I just wanted to put that out
That's
there.
why we switched from 2 to 3 eventually.
Ours
Okay.
too.
And we've got Barbara again. Go ahead, Barbara.
Well, I think we've just covered what I was going to say, and I appreciate everything that Karen was going for, but I think Jen really hit on. I think it was Jen. You just about any job, right? You figure out like where the bathrooms are and where the cafeteria is, and then you start working. And so I think 3 makes more sense. I also, this is a big deal that we're doing this. And I want us to be as consistent with other committees and commissions as possible. So we're not seen as an outlier, but one among everyone. And so if people are used to applying for 3-year terms, I think that's fair. And I think the staggered start at the beginning will kind of help us work this out. If people think it's too much or too little or whatever, and they can cycle off. But I don't think 3 is too much to ask. And life changes happen all the time. And they could happen after a year, 2 years, whatever. So I think we go with 3 and we kind of meet that standard with the rest of the city.
And I was just going to add, we had this happen with cemetery committee, where they started with 2-year term appointed consecutive with council sessions. And 7 months into their term, they came in and asked for redefinition, longer terms, fewer members, because they had too many members and they had troubles making quorum. And so we had that experience with the committee just this year, and they're a really active committee. And so it was kind of surprising that they came back and asked for that change, but they did. So we have seen that.
So what I've got and what I've heard, but let's do the same thing again without motions and all that, just so we can get a look. And folks who are on the Zoom line, if you wouldn't mind chiming in either with a chat or visual hand or a simulated hand. Barbara, yours is still up. Okay, got it. So I guess we have 2 options. We could specify 2 years. We can specify 3 years. We've had great points on each side. What is our prevailing thoughts as a group? We'll just kick it off. If it's close, we'll just keep talking about it. All in favor of 2? 2? Well, we've got none here.
No.
Okay, does anybody have any extra comments on it? Okay, good. I think we've covered it. I never want someone to leave here not thinking they had their voice heard. So good. So Kate, to summarize again, we've got mostly as is. We've got 4 people. You've got recommendations for some grammar terminology changes. We're going to do a kickoff instructions for how to stagger. And that's all I got. Is there anything I'm missing?
Sounds good.
So then I'll say to Kate, I'll turn it over to Kate. We are at 1, but this is probably the most important thing we'll be doing. No offense, other work groups. Go ahead, Kate. What else do you need from us?
Can I get a motion to approve with amendments that were
So
just
moved.
laid out?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I,
I'm looking at the Zoom, just so you know. I saw you. Thank you. There you go. The ayes have it. All opposed, nay. All opposed. Sorry, we'll make sure if someone has any nays, they get in there. Okay.
What exactly is was the word in the motion?
A motion to approve with amendments.
Approves the
Ordinance.
draft ordinance.
Draft ordinance with amendments, yeah. And I have to ask a clerical question. Is this officially a joint meeting of?
Yes.
Okay, so it does it need to go back to arts and profits?
No, it shouldn't.
Okay.
No.
So then, for everyone's knowledge, I will move this on to the governance committee. And I will report back to you if there are any requested changes.
Awesome. Wonderful. Nice work, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, great job.
I just wanted to add that we were hoping a lot of people on this committee would be applying for the new commission. And I think I saw Robin raise her hand a couple times.
Okay, well, let's we'll keep pushing here.
Anybody by name.
Not putting anyone on the spot.
We'll keep pushing here. We've got a few more things to make sure to cover. Again, thank you, Kate. Thank you all to who started that and everybody here who had great points. Work group 4, communication plan update.
Just that we're going to meet with ACG on Thursday morning.
can you please get closer to the microphone?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I always forget that. Just we're going to be meeting on Thursday morning with ACG to start the kickoff of our work with them, and that Russ is graciously agreed to join us as a member. Other than that, I have nothing to report. Jason, are you?
Nope,
nothing
in addition.
Suzanne?
Karen, can I just ask it, did ACG confirm that?
No, I have to work with you on that.
Okay,
We just today nailed that
Got
was the time.
great.
So you made that arrangement directly with them?
No,
Not yet.
So
I'm going to work through Sean. We just agreed as a group that that was the time frame that we
so,
could.
so that's when you're inviting ACG, but
Ex-
they haven't.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you. Work group 4, work group 5, community engagement.
Okay, well, we're kind of in the same boat. I mean, we haven't made a proposal as to a date to meet with them. We were hoping that they would be contacting us saying, this is your contact person, and that they would be initiating when we would meet. But if we're gonna, I mean, what do we need to do to get
Yeah,
that
so-
first meeting?
so I'll answer, as I understand it, what I was asked for to send ACG was the dates that the working groups that are still meeting are meeting, and then they're gonna figure out how to attend the ones they can. 'Cause
So,
go ahead.
okay, so we should get together and give this a number of times. This is when we can meet. Which one can you join us? Is that right?
Yeah, if you don't have a standing schedule, then I would say,
Oh, I see the confusion. Maybe, Jeffrey, maybe Travis. I think the original discussion with ACG, and I'm looking at Sean for confirmation, was that ACG would start attending your work group meetings at the time that you're having the work group meeting, unless for some reason they can't, in which case maybe you would want to reschedule.
Right.
So if you've got a set work group 5 meeting time, please give that to Sean. He'll get it to ACG. If it doesn't work, then maybe they'll talk and we'll figure out another solution.
Okay, and they would be doing it by Zoom
Yes.
or,
yes,
okay, so in term. Okay, so the only other update we have is that Tom's has joined our committee, so we now have 4 on our group. And okay, we get what we need to do next. Is there any prospect of their being here in Portsmouth in person for face-to-face?
Yes, they do have scheduled times. Those times were not exact dates, but they were in the plan. I think you can probably find it as in the proposal that you sent out? Oh, no, was the proposal, I keep saying proposal. What I actually mean is the interview slides. If we get those interview slides, that would be helpful because it would answer some of the questions that our folks are having.
Yeah, I don't think they put anything in stone in terms of knowing before we even had the kickoff when they were going to be here. So, and what the conversation I recall that Karen and Alan were kind of leading Thursday was, I send them anything we have scheduled for meetings, and they're going to look at those and attend as much as they can. Primarily, I think, to start in Zoom until they can figure out we've got X number of times we can be here, and they're going to plan to be here. But I don't think those dates are settled. It was just late Thursday or Friday when I was pushing information to them.
The proposal includes, because it was part of their bid price, the number of times and number of people that would come out here. So that we have.
Okay.
The exact dates are as Sean described.
All right,
determined.
I mean, because I'm kind of old school and I like being in the room with you people, you know?
Mhm. So they will be here, dates to be determined, and they won't all be here all the time.
And I will get clarification, but I think the primary focus on them being here was to meet with this CPS, not necessarily different work groups. I think the attending work group meetings is what came from the conversation would be helpful, right? For them to be able to very quickly dial into specifically these two groups, all the work you've done and are doing.
Okay.
And this way they get integrated into it without having to either recreate it. But I don't think it was ever on the books for them to come to work group meetings.
All right, well, I got it. So we've got what we need.
Yep.
We need to take the initial step rather than wait for them to.
Right. Because they want to work with the schedules you all have in place. But
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks. I'm glad we clarified that. So we're not at different objectives. Thank you, Jeffrey. Okay, so that is our work group 4 and our work group 5. Other business. Is there anything we haven't covered that we would like to discuss? No, Sean. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
we got John over here.
So just based on the questions about ACG attending the meetings, I mean, at some point we had talked about having a master calendar. Would that be a useful template for this process? So as we move towards completing the cultural plan, does it make sense to try and identify when the work groups are meeting, when we're meeting with ACG, how I know we haven't defined when community outreach is going. I'm just putting out there, could a conceptual calendar, or I guess it's never conceptual, could a calendar be helpful for that? That's a question.
I know that they had talked about setting up a shared workspace so we can bring up the calendar. They had AG.
Yeah.
ACG
We're gonna,
had
I mean,
talked about it.
I think we began this with a sense of urgency and a deadline. And like Kate, perhaps we can work backwards from when we think the cultural plan will be completed and identify what are the steps that are happening between then and now. And, at least, put them in pencil in the calendar and we know what's happening.
So I really like the idea of a centralized calendar for what we're trying to accomplish. I think Karen brings up an interesting point. If they talked about having some type of collaborative workspace, whether we should, through Sean, request that they share with us a calendar that we're able to interact with, or whether we should do that independently on our own. Because I want to duplicate efforts and do something twice. And they really need to be in the loop on everything on the calendar. So if they can create that for us and we're able to access it and be able to adjust it and enter things in it, I think that would be most effective.
That is exactly what I was assuming was going to happen, but now I'll ask the question just like the other one you had, John. Thanks. Because I think them owning it makes it easier for us. Them updating it makes it easier for us. And they're going to have the lion's share of stuff on it. So I think that makes it easier for us as well. So I'll include that in the questions that came out of today's meeting that I'll send to Sean, who Sean can send to ACG. Thanks.
Thank you.
Barbara.
just other things, since this is a joint meeting, wondering if Robin or Renee have anything to update us with regard to AFTA, or just make sure we don't forget about it and we keep having it as a discussion point, because there will be work coming down the pike in the fall.
Yeah, there's nothing really new to report. There was a total of 925 surveys. We don't know, just because of a little spreadsheet glitch, we don't know exactly how many organizations completed, probably 25. And we'll be meeting again very soon to do next steps, which is to talk about what do we do when the rollout comes. We'll be asking to meet with Sean because there are going to be some expenses. So that's where we're at.
Great, thanks, Robin.
Renee and Robin, this is Russ. I have one other thing that has come up since we started talking about the rollout in January. I am working with the Rotary Club to get him scheduled for a noontime meeting on the day that he's here. But what I didn't realize is that there's a presidential primary in late January, early February. I don't know if they've officially set the date yet. And the Portsmouth Noontime Club is notorious for having big candidates come through last minute and bump whoever is there. So I just want people to be aware of the possibility that if Joe Biden decides he wants to come to town and speak to the Rotary that day, or whoever is up against him decides they do, or, well, it's probably not Biden, it's probably going to be all the Republican candidates is what's really going to happen, because they're going to be having the viable primary. So there's probably going to be 10 Republican candidates, of which probably 6 or 7 are going to want to speak to that club in the weeks leading up to the primary. So just something to have on your radar. I'm going to do my best to secure the date for him, but that does happen.
One comment,
yeah,
if I might, Mr. Chair. Iowa just set their caucuses for January 15th. I think by New Hampshire law, we have to go before then. So
maybe we'll dodge that bullet. They'll have to come during the holiday. Yeah.
But thanks for bringing that up. Thank you.
Yeah, just to keep it on people's radar.
Other business? Russ, PNAC folks, all good to go. That was a great point there, everybody.
Yeah.
No further business, no further business.
Good.
Okay, motion, please. I can't motion. You
Motion to adjourn, excuse me.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All against?
Thank you.
And the ayes have it.
Yes.
Good job.
Yeah.